the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, or NNPC as it's more commonly known, is mulling over the odds of an initial public offer of its shares after it declared net earnings for the first time in its 44 years of operations. Now, this comes after the country's President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the Petroleum Industry Act, which enables the state-owned oil giant to essentially offer its shares to the public. Listing of its shares would essentially draw on the experience of the Saudi Arabian oil giant Saudi Aramco, which listed its shares in 2019 in a pretty big IPO. But the news of the proposed sales of NNPC shares to the public and its subsequent listing on the Nigerian exchange is expected to help improve transparency and accountability of the oil firm, which has been bedeviled by enormous large-scale corruption and opacity for decades. All right, then, so that's the general plan. The idea is that you might be able to essentially list NNPC at the Nigerian stock market. But does it actually make sense? Let's explore that in some detail. Michael Faniran is an advisor on oil and gas policy matters. He's joining us live on the program tonight. Thank you very much for your time, sir. So let's start with a broad picture here, because NNPC is reporting net earnings for the first time in over 4 decades. But how does a firm with widespread reach across one of Africa's biggest oil and gas markets, how does it only start producing profits now?
Thanks for having me. I think the short answer to your question is that NNPC was not actually set up to make profit, and that's the main issue why NNPC has not been making profits for a lot of time. Like in all other developing countries, you see the NOC were created not just for the purpose of commercial activities, but most of the time to deliver social services. NNPC, like others, has been created just like an agency of government, and most of the time to deliver social services for government. Most of the time, there is no clear commercial objective for NNPC, and most of the time you see NNPC prioritizing non-commercial activities or objectives over commercial objectives because of the political demands of the government. So what some of the things that NNPC has been bearing in time past has been the cost of political interventions on the operation of NNPC, the lack of transparency in terms of, then again, weak governance structure, and they are not incentivized to make profit. They are not incentivized to be efficient, actually. So there are a lot of inefficiencies. I've done a study, actually, where I compare NNPC with about 5 other peer NOCs, and it was glaring. And most of the time, people tend to blame the people who manage NNPC. But again, their problem is not more around operation. It's actually more structural.
All right, we'll get to those in just a moment. But I guess let's step back for a moment here. Given all the political objectives or the social objectives that you've pointed out in setting up NNPC initially, what's the upside now for the federal government to say, okay, let's take this company public. Let's give up some of that 75% in dividends that would essentially get from this company under the PIA?
So I think the best thing that happened to the industry in a very long while is the passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill and the assent to it by the president, which has now become the Petroleum Industry Act. So selling the shares is one of the plans in the new act. It's not going to happen overnight for you to even list, for you to go public. It has to be the NNPC Limited. You know, the act specified that a new organization will be created, which is NNPC Limited. So you can't actually privatize or take this current corporation to the market. So we're going to have NNPC Limited. And one of the objectives of it is actually to subject the NNPC Limited to market regulations, to make them transparent, to create a sense of belonging for all Nigerians or for investors. So for me, the answer, or what government has really done is actually the passage of this Petroleum Industry Bill, which has now become an act. This will allow NNPC to be forced them to actually open their books. You know, they have not been transparent. I think it's only when this current GMD came into power that we began to see auditor reports. I think it has produced about 3 or 4 now. We are waiting for the new one on the new earnings. That's why I've not really commented on the new earnings until we see the auditor report. We can really not comment or mostly on that. But you can see we have a new GMD now who has at least been open. But again, another GMD could have come and say it's not going to be open. There is no incentive for them to be open, to be transparent.
And
So
is there no legal way of compelling a GMD, assuming, let's assume for argument's sake that the PI is not in place, was there no way of compelling the general managing director, the group managing director of NNPC to make these numbers public? Because at the end of the day, it is a public asset that Nigerians own, and when NNPC makes losses, Nigerian taxpayers are on the hook for that.
I don't think, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think you can really compel them because of the law that set them up. And that is what the Petroleum Industry Act has tried to correct. Now, NNPC is going to be registered as a company or corporation under CAMA. It's going to be subjected to the law of CAMA. They are obliged, so they are under obligation to make the record public. They are subjected to the market forces. They are forced to open their books. So when government wants to sell shares or government want to privatize or want to list the NNPC Limited, I think that's what it's trying to achieve. There's going to be transparency. They are going to be forced to open their books. Everybody's going to know the earnings. Now, there have been a lot of discussion around the NNPC declaring profits or not. A lot of people have not believed the NNPC is making profit. There have been a lot of issues, a lot of discussion on this. But again, we are waiting for the auditor report. But we would have not needed to wait because this 2020 report we are talking about when they become under CAMA. So I would rather not judge them on what they have done in the past. I'll start judging them on what they are able to do under the new Petroleum Industry Act.
Okay, fair enough. So from the data, though, that we've seen, the one that's been made public, I'm referring in this case for 2019, it's pretty clear that NNPC has a problem with some of its expense management. With general and administrative expenses, those are pretty high. They're basically wiping out whatever margins they do have. What needs to be done to whip this company into shape, to make it IPO ready?
Okay, like I mentioned, NNPC is not IPO ready. What's going to go on IPO is not the NNPC, the corporation that we have, until the NNPC Limited is set up. That's the only enterprise entity that can go on IPO. And for now, according to our laws, they need to make a profit for like 3 consecutive years, be transparent before they can even consider that. So that is still a very long way to go, but that provision is in the Petroleum Industry Act. Then talking about the liability that they have, well, NNPC have a lot of liabilities. Some are contingent liabilities, some are claims against NNPC about, at the time was around $8 billion, which are contingent liabilities, and some of these are claims. But if you look at the Petroleum Industry Act very well, we discover that there are some provisions there that for you to renew some of the things, conversion, there's a clause around conversion. You need to actually leave those claims against NNPC. You have to forget about that. Then again, the liabilities of NNPC that they are holding currently is now going to be taken over by Ministry of Finance Incorporated, because if you say the NNPC Limited is going to hold all those liabilities, there will be no going concern from day one. So those liabilities are going to be stripped off them, and it's going to be managed by Ministry of Finance Incorporated. So the NNPC Limited is starting on a fresh note. So
in effect, they'll be getting a bailout from Nigerian taxpayers yet again, just before they go public.
Not a bailout per se, but the right thing to do is to, because you are setting up a new limited, and you don't want them to be encumbered by the liabilities of the old corporation. In the previous version of the PIB, there is supposed to be an asset management company that will take this, but in the wisdom of the new draft of the PIB, this is going to be taken over by the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, and they are going to extinguish this asset on their own and find a way to extinguish those assets. But like I mentioned to you, the contingent liabilities, we have to, that one we go, because for you to your conversion, some of those claims, you have to relinquish some of those claims that you have against NNPC. I told you about $8 billion of this liability are claims. Some of them are actually real claims, though. But again, that's what the law says in terms of the conversion.
All right. Right. We'll leave it there for the time being. I'd love to continue this debate, Michael Faniran, but we have run out of time. Thank you very much for your time this evening.